Hey y'all, I'm Hope, and today I'm super excited to be starting the next installment of my Goodreads Choice Nominees, Sci-Fi and Fantasy Nominees reading project. I still don't know what to call this thing, but I'll figure it out later. Anyway, I'm particularly excited about this next installment because I'm going to be reading the entirety of the Murderbot Diaries. I just happen to have All Systems Red, that's the one that I own, but I've been wanting to read these for ages, and I know like everybody loves Murderbot, so I've been really excited about this. So I'm going to be reading the entirety of these because the 6th book, Fugitive Telemetry, came out this year, and that one is nominated as one of the best sci-fi books, and I believe, yeah, it made it into the final round. So I'm really excited to read these, and yeah, I'm gonna read the entire series. I actually have already read All Systems Red. I finished this one last night. I completely forgot that I meant to film like an intro for this before I started the series, but I've already read this one, and I absolutely loved it. I think that this book has a lot of really interesting ideas around like identity and who gets to be people and or like perceived as people, especially because there's like humans and then augmented humans who are like seen slightly differently from the regular humans, but they're all seen completely differently from the sec units like Murderbot. So there's a lot of interesting things around that. Also, like, Murderbot's just a whole mood because it's super socially anxious, and like I feel that. I am too, and I too would like to go stand in a corner with my emotions and not make eye contact with people. I can't do that. I'm not a sec unit, but like I love Murderbot so much. So I really enjoyed this one. I think that the plot in this one is really, really well done, especially because of the way that it's told through Murderbot's perspective. So there's this like interesting world building thing happening where there's stuff that you know there's an explanation for, but the explanation isn't given because Murderbot just doesn't care. So Murderbot doesn't know the thing, and because it's narrated by Murderbot, you just don't get to know the thing. But like you have this sense, you have enough context to kind of get what's going on, but you just don't get like the specifics because Murderbot doesn't care about it. So I think that's a really fun element of this. And also I really liked the supporting characters, particularly Dr. Mensa and Rathi. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his name, but I really liked him as well. There's lots of great characters in it. And yeah, it reminded me a little bit of like Dead Space, but like less horror-y because Murderbot is so calm about everything. Yeah, I don't know exactly how to describe that, but it gave me like Dead Space vibes without the like horror elements of it, but there was like some creepy stuff happening. So I really enjoyed this one. I am super excited to pick up the next one. I've already started it actually, and I'm going to be reading that this evening, so hopefully I'll be checking back in with you soon, having finished Artificial Condition as well. Alright, so I finished Artificial Condition a few minutes ago, and I gotta say I liked it just as much as the first book. The plot is very different, and I think it expands the world in some really interesting ways where we're seeing areas outside of like the control of the company that Murderbot is originally from. Hi, Pumpkin. My cat is down here scratching things, so if you hear him making noise, it would be Pumpkin. But yeah, it expands the world in some interesting ways. There's this interesting theme throughout of like Murderbot realizing that people care about it, which is really sweet. There's also a really interesting friendship that happens in it. Ow, Pumpkin. Thank you. Thank you, buddy. Here's the little troublemaker himself. Hey, Pumpkin. Big yawns. Alright. So yeah, it expands the world in interesting ways. There's a fun friendship that shows up in it that I really liked. I also think there's some really interesting things happening with the book structure that are like, the whole thing is, hi. Would you like to be up? The cat keeps putting his little paws on me. There's some interesting things with the structure of the story where like the whole thing is framed as being a story told by Murderbot, which makes it really interesting when Murderbot like delays specific things for dramatic effect, which is I think really cool because it suggests that like Murderbot is telling the story and like sees the world through stories after having watched like thousands and thousands of hours of TV. Murderbot loves stories, and like Murderbot knows how to tell a story. So I think that's a really fun like meta element to it. But yeah, I really enjoyed Artificial Condition. It also had some interesting implications around some of the different constructs, like Murderbot, some of the sec units and comfort units. So there's some interesting implications about like whether they might all be sentient, so that's cool. Yeah, I really am enjoying that, and overall I'm really enjoying the series. I think Murderbot is a very charming and unusual narrator, and I just like the way that the stories are framed. So I am starting Rogue Protocol, and I'm probably gonna finish that one tomorrow, so I will probably be checking back with you guys then. Okay, so I finished Rogue Protocol about 5 days ago. I have just now had a moment to like think about recording this, but I finished Rogue Protocol, and the thing that I think enjoyed the most about this installment, besides the fact that like the plotting as always is really well paced, and I really enjoy the way that Murderbot talks about the world, I also really enjoyed that there is a new character who's introduced, who I think their introduction creates some really interesting questions about the world that Murderbot is living in, particularly surrounding like bots and sentience. So like, are all bots sentient or are they not? Is this character sentient or not? The character is a bot. And then that character's relationships also are really interesting because it suggests this, the relationships that Murderbot has seen between bots and humans elsewhere are not necessarily typical relationships or always the norm, but they are the relationships that Murderbot thinks are the norm. So there's some interesting questions there about like bots and humans. So I think that was really cool. I also think that Rogue Protocol has one of the most bittersweet endings of the series so far. I think this is the ending where Murderbot has most had to like deal with difficult emotions, which I found really fascinating because a lot of this series is kind of following Murderbot beginning to encounter more situations that force it to confront difficult emotions that it maybe hasn't had to confront before. But I probably should mention real quick that Rogue Protocol follows Murderbot as it is going to this planet where a corporation mentioned in the first book has set up a terraforming station that's since been abandoned, and Murderbot is going to this terraforming station to try and uncover some further information about what this corporation is up to. So again, I really like this plot. I think this is really fun. I like that like each instance or each installment in the series is like a little self-contained adventure, but each one is also connected to like this overarching plot about Murderbot and the people it met in the first book. So I'm really enjoying the kind of like little episodic chunks of Murderbot content that have like kind of a link across. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening, and I am loving the series so much. I read the first 3 books in 3 days, and the only reason I've not continued on and read the 4th book is I'm still waiting for my haul to come in from the library. So I think I'm like first or second in line I was the last time I looked. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that that is going to come in soon so that I can continue reading. Once that haul comes in, I think I can almost read. Oh, it says available soon now, so fingers crossed. That means the next like day or two. Usually pretty quick once it says that. But yeah, that is kind of the check-in for now. I am halfway through the series. I'm also planning to read the short story Home, which comes between the 4th and 5th books. So yeah, I'm like halfway through, and I am very, very excited to binge read the last half. Okay, so I have finished 2 more of the Murderbot stories. I finished Exit Strategy last night. I think Exit Strategy is maybe my favorite one of the whole arc. So the first 4 books form one arc. There was originally supposed to be 4 books in the series, so there's like one narrative arc across the 4, with like each one being an individual adventure that builds upon the arc. And then there's like the other 2. And I don't know if the novel starts a new arc or if that's like going to be self-contained and then like Fugitive Telemetry will start a new arc, but whatever. I finished Exit Strategy, and it's the kind of conclusion of the arc of the first 4 books, and I loved it. I think Exit Strategy might be my favorite one of the arcs, or one of my favorite one of the narrative arc that it's a part of, because it just does such a good job tying all of the like little questions and themes and elements of the first 3 books together and creating a really satisfying conclusion. So Exit Strategy follows Murderbot as, after having gone to Milu, it decides to try and find Dr. Mensa so it can give the information it has collected on Greycrest to Dr. Mensa. Ow, just punched my desk. And it decides to do that, but finds out that Dr. Mensa has been captured, and so has to try and break Dr. Mensa out of where she's being held captive. And it's just a really fun one. It's like, it's a prison break. And it's fun too because Murderbot gets to meet back up with old friends from the first book. There's kind of this interesting reunion that happens, and I just really liked the way it tied all of the narrative threads together. I liked the way that the breakout plan worked out. I thought that was really interesting, and there was a lot of like bits where Murderbot now had to deal with the complex emotions it has around Dr. Mensa and the Preservation Ox crew. So I just thought that was really well done. I liked that Murderbot finally had to like face some of what it had been avoiding facing. I just thought that was well done. The other thing that I did read was there is a short story that comes directly after Exit Strategy. It's called Home. Anyway, this one directly follows Exit Strategy, and it's actually from Dr. Mensa's point of view. And I really enjoyed this as well. I think it adds more interesting questions because this story is basically about Dr. Mensa grappling with the PTSD she is now experiencing as a result of having been held captive. And I thought that that was really well done as well. It's really interesting because it's basically the first time that we're getting a view of the world that the Murderbot Diaries takes place in from a character who isn't Murderbot. So you kind of find out more about preservation, you find out more about Dr. Mensa and the other characters that Murderbot like has avoided finding out about or doesn't care about. So you find out more about them, you learn a little bit about Dr. Mensa's family and about the relationship dynamics she has with some of her family as well as the other members of the crew. So that's really interesting. You also interestingly learn more about Murderbot through Dr. Mensa's like thoughts about Murderbot and through her interactions with Murderbot. So I just think it fleshes out the world in a really interesting way and is really well done for a short story. I'm not usually huge on short stories, but I think that this one just adds some additional context that's really interesting to the world. It also adds, like, raises some more questions because one of the things happening is, like, they're needing to grapple with the fact that Murderbot is a sec unit, which doesn't get categorized as human, doesn't get categorized as a bot, is in fact a third thing besides human or bot. And they need to figure out how to grapple with that, both in their understanding of who Murderbot is and in the kind of legal system of the Preservation Alliance. It creates some interesting conflicts. So I just thought this was a really fantastic short story, and I'm glad that I took the time to read it. Okay, so I finished Network Effect a couple of days ago, and I love it just as much as I loved every other entry. I was really interested to see how I felt about this one because it's the first of the Murderbot books that isn't a part of the original arc that begins in All Systems Red. So I was really interested to see where the story was going to go from there, and I loved it. I think it's so well done. It's the first of the novels, which was, it's the only novel, is what I should say. All of the books before it and then the one that comes after it are all novellas, so it is interesting from a format perspective of coming from all these like short books that I was reading in a day to then having a much longer book that took me several days to finish. It's taken me a couple of days to kind of get my head around what I think about it because there's so much going on that it just had a lot more space to bring in new ideas. So in Network Effect, now that the kind of first narrative arc has ended, Murderbot is now working with a survey team that is partially made up of characters we've already met and partially made up with characters that are new. And what I thought was really interesting here is that we kind of have this thing where most of the characters that we've already met have kind of reached a point where they're like, okay, generally we like Murderbot, we agree with Murderbot, we think Murderbot is great. So there's these new characters that have to be introduced to kind of create some more tension that, like, there needed to be new people who didn't totally know if they trusted Murderbot or not to kind of bring in some more tension into the group. And I thought that was really well done. We are introduced to a couple of Dr. Mensa's family members who, having not been involved in the stuff that happened in the first arc, are kind of dubious on whether they like Murderbot or not. And they have various different reasons. And that's the thing I find very interesting is that all of the characters that have so far like kind of been suspicious of Murderbot have very different reasons that all make sense, but they have very different reasons for why they don't necessarily trust Murderbot to begin with. So I thought that was really interesting. I also really enjoyed this plot because it goes in so many different directions. It has a lot more space than the earlier books did to kind of spread out. So they start out on a survey and Murderbot is rescuing them again because Murderbot is always rescuing the stupid humans. And then it just kind of kicks off from there and goes in a lot of different directions that I wasn't expecting. And I don't want to say too much just because there are some reveals even very early on in the book that I think if you're interested in this series and if you're reading it, you should definitely read it for yourself. But suffice it to say that there is the recurrence of an old friend in a way that I didn't quite expect, but it was really interesting. This book also does a lot to further Murderbot's relationships with the different characters. So we get a deepening of Murderbot's relationships with some of the characters we already knew. And then also we get to see how Murderbot navigates the relationships with a couple new characters who don't necessarily like it or get along well with it. So I just thought this was really fascinating and well done. There's a lot of questions in it about like sentience and about like, is Murderbot weird because Murderbot has hacked its governor module, or is Murderbot weird because it is Murderbot? So there's some questions around that. We learn a lot more about like some of the alien remnants that are mentioned in the first book. We learn some more about them. We learn more about like how terraforming works in this world. So there's just a lot of new world stuff and we get to see a lot more of Murderbot's development. So I really enjoyed Network Effect and I'm interested to see where the series goes from here. So now I am down to just the last book that's been out, or that's out so far. The one that is actually nominated for the 2021 Goodreads Choice Awards. It did not win, but it was nominated and I think it got quite a few votes as well. But that was Fugitive Telemetry. And I've heard that this one is a little bit different from the other ones because rather than being like set chronologically after Network Effect, it's actually a prequel to Network Effect. It takes place between Exit Strategy and Network Effect. And it doesn't necessarily move the plot forward as much as it does tell us more about the world and kind of shows us how Murderbot does or does not fit into Preservation Station. I have a friend who's reading it right now and we were kind of talking about this today because she was wanting to talk about it without giving me too many spoilers. So that was one of the things that she mentioned, is it's not so much moving the plot as it is giving us more of a view into how Murderbot fits in or doesn't fit into its new life on Preservation Station. So I'm really interested to see how that goes. Also, Fugitive Telemetry is a murder mystery, which is one of my favorite kind of plot engines for anything. So I'm very excited about this one. And today I finally finished Fugitive Telemetry. So I'm now completely caught up with the Murderbot Diaries, which is very exciting. But this was the book that was nominated and I really liked it. I actually, I agree with it having been nominated. I think it's a really interesting entry in the series. It is very different from the other books. Similar to what my friend said, I also thought it kind of like, it doesn't push the plot forward. It's not giving us a new part of Murderbot's like plot arc, but it establishes a lot of things around Preservation Station and Murderbot's role there, how well Murderbot does or does not fit in, who it has friendships with, who it has rivalries with. So it's kind of setting up the like new status quo for Murderbot and its current like living conditions. So I think that was really interesting on that level. It also gives us a look at how Murderbot's relationship with an important character on Preservation Station has developed. That character is mentioned in Network Effect. It's one of the people involved with station security. And Fugitive Telemetry is in a lot of ways a like study of how Murderbot's relationship with this other character has developed into the point that we see in Network Effect. So I just thought that was really interesting. Plus it's a murder mystery, which is really fun. And like a lot of the Murderbot books, it kind of starts at murder mystery and then snowballs into something else, which I thought was really well done. The way that the murder mystery connects into the larger plot of the novella is really good. So I really enjoyed Fugitive Telemetry. I don't think it's my favorite entry in the series, if only because Exit Strategy and Network Effect are so good at what they are doing. But I do think it's really interesting and gives us a lot of important information on Murderbot's like life as it is now subsequent to the events of the first 4 books, because it kind of falls chronologically between Exit Strategy and Network Effect. So I thought it was a really interesting entry and I completely agree with it having been nominated. So that being said, this is the, I think at the point that I'm recording this, this is the second one of the actual nominees that I finished. And I will say that so far they've been really strong. I did like Fugitive Telemetry better than the last one I finished, which was Winter's Orbit, which you will either see a video before this, it will already be up, or it will be coming up soon. But yeah, that's 2 of the nominees down, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest, especially given how much luck I've had so far with this project. I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the nominees. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed reading all of these books and making this video. If you liked this video, I hope you'll consider giving this a like and maybe even subscribing, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!